«Папа, спаси нас». Эти 4 слова, написанные детским почерком на клочке бумаги, обрушили мир судьи Ли Джун Хо в одно мгновение.
Dad, save us. Those 4 words, scrawled in a child's handwriting on a scrap of paper, shattered Judge Lee Jun Ho's world in an instant. It all began like any other Monday. That morning, as always, he adjusted his judicial robe and headed into the courtroom to preside over another domestic violence case. The 40-year-old judge with an impeccable reputation was used to such cases. In 20 years of practice he had handled hundreds. The court will now hear the case of plaintiff Min Ji-yoon versus defendant Kim Tae-min regarding divorce and alimony, he announced, reading from the file. It was at that moment his eyes fell on the plaintiff. A dark-haired woman sitting beside her attorney looked strangely familiar. And when he looked closer, Min Ji-yoon, his first love. The girl he had left 17 years ago, choosing a prestigious university over their relationship. But the real shock came when he noticed the boy next to her. A teenager, around 16, bearing his very own face, his eyes, his mole on the left cheek. Like a reflection in the mirror of time. Jun Ho felt the blood drain from his face. Could this boy really be? Then the teenager stood up. Under the astonished gaze of everyone present, he walked to the bench and silently handed over a folded note. For the judge, he said quietly before returning to his seat. Jun Ho unfolded the paper with trembling hands and read, "Dad, save us." Time froze. The courtroom, the attorneys, the witnesses, everything vanished. Only the terrible truth remained. 17 years ago, he had abandoned his pregnant lover without knowing it. He had a son. And that son was now begging him to save him and his mother from the man sitting across the room, Kim Tae-min, accused of systematic abuse. "Your Honor?" The attorney prompted nervously. "Can you continue?" Jun Ho lifted his gaze and met the boy's eyes. In them he saw fear, hope, and desperate pleading. Beside him, Ji-yoon sat pale as a sheet. At the defense table, Kim Tae-min observed the scene with a cold smirk, as though savoring the spectacle. "A recess of 10 minutes is declared," the judge rasped, clenching the note in his fist. He rose and walked to his chambers, realizing his life had just been split into before and after. His legs barely carried him down the corridor. 17 years lost, 17 years during which his son grew up without a father and was now suffering at the hands of another man. And the worst of it, the boy knew the truth and was pleading for salvation from the very man who had once betrayed them. The court will now hear the case against Kim Sang-wook, charged with systematic physical and psychological abuse of his wife, Min Ji-yoon, Jun Ho pronounced, forcing his voice to remain steady and professional. "Prosecutor, please present the charges." Lim So-yeon rose from her seat. A woman of average height with short hair and a determined gaze, she carried a thick case file in her hands. "Your Honor," she began, "the defendant, Kim Sang-wook, for 3 years systematically subjected his wife, Min Ji-yoon, to physical and psychological abuse. The case files contain medical reports documenting injuries of varying severity, witness testimony, and photographic evidence." She began reading the indictment, her clear professional voice the only sound in the heavy silence that filled the courtroom. The facts she listed painted a grim picture of family life: bruises, fractures, threats, constant psychological pressure. The first recorded incident of violence occurred 8 months into the marriage, the prosecutor continued. The victim visited the emergency room with complaints of rib pain. The physician diagnosed a chest contusion, but the victim claimed she had fallen down the stairs. Out of the corner of his eye, Jun Ho watched Ji-yoon. She sat motionless, only clenching her jaw from time to time as particularly painful details were read aloud. Her face betrayed no emotion, but Jun Ho saw the trembling in her hands, folded on her lap. The boy beside her, her son, listened intently as well, but his face revealed less fear than restrained fury. From time to time he cast hateful glances toward his stepfather, and in those moments Jun Ho recognized something painfully familiar, the same burning anger he himself had felt as a young man whenever faced with injustice. The second case was recorded 6 months later, Lim So-yeon continued. This time, the victim was admitted to the hospital with a concussion. She claimed she had struck her head on a doorframe. The defense attorney whispered something to his client, but Kim Sang-wook ignored him, his eyes fixed on his wife, his gaze filled with threat. Your Honor, the prosecutor pressed on, the victim is prepared to testify that the accused threatened not only her, but also her minor son, Min Tae-hyun, using family secrets as a tool of psychological pressure. At the mention of the boy's name, something clenched in Jun Ho's chest. Tae-hyun. A beautiful Korean name meaning virtuous and wise. Why had Ji-yoon chosen it? And why did it sound so hauntingly familiar? The defense attorney, Choi Dong-won, rose. A man with cunning eyes and the skill to turn black into white. Your Honor, he said with the confidence of an experienced lawyer, my client categorically denies all charges. He is the victim of a family conflict provoked by his wife's unstable behavior. We will present evidence that Min Ji-yoon herself provoked arguments and even inflicted injuries on herself to accuse her husband. Ji-yoon flinched as if struck but kept her eyes lowered. Tae-hyun, however, snapped his head toward the attorney, and Jun Ho saw such a flash of fury in the boy's eyes that even the seasoned lawyer faltered for a moment. Furthermore, Choi Dong-won pressed on, we will prove that the true reason for this case is the victim's desire to rid herself of an unwanted husband so she can reunite with the father of her illegitimate child. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Journalists in the back rows came alive, sensing a scandal. Jun Ho banged his gavel, calling for order, though his own heartbeat thundered in his chest. Call the first witness for the prosecution, he ordered, striving to maintain a neutral tone. An elderly woman named Lee Yun-suk, the Kim family's neighbor, approached the stand. Around 60, dressed in a simple dark dress, she looked nervous, clearly unused to court. Please tell the court what you observed while living next door to the defendant's family, the prosecutor requested. The woman spoke softly, the clerk prompting her several times to raise her voice. I've lived across the hall for 20 years, she began. When Sang-wook brought home a new wife, I was glad. He had lived alone for a long time after divorcing his first wife. At first everything seemed quiet, but then the shouting began. She recounted how she had heard the sounds of struggle, a woman's cries, a child's sobs. How she had seen Ji-yoon with bruises, which she tried to cover with makeup. How one late night Ji-yoon and her son knocked on her door begging for shelter. She was in tears, the witness said, her voice trembling. Her face was swollen, her lips split. And the boy. He wasn't shaking from fear, but from anger. He clenched his fists and said he would kill that man if he touched his mother again. Jun Ho's eyes drifted to Tae-hyun. The boy sat tensely, fists clenched, his posture carrying a maturity far beyond his years. As if he had long since taken on the role of protector for his mother, assuming the mantle of man in the family. And what happened after such incidents? The prosecutor asked. The next morning Ji-yoon would return home. She'd say everything was fine, just a misunderstanding. But I could see her fear. How she flinched at every sudden sound. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Lee Yun-suk, he began with a patronizing smile, can you state with certainty who initiated these conflicts? What do you mean? Could the shouting have come from Min Ji-yoon herself? Could she have provoked her husband? The elderly woman bristled. Nonsense. I heard him yelling at her, insulting her. And she only cried. But you didn't actually see what happened inside the apartment, did you? Isn't it possible that she herself broke dishes, that she injured herself? Young man, Lee Yun-suk said sternly, I raised 5 children. I know the difference between crying from pain and a tantrum. That woman was suffering. The next witness was Dr. Park Hye-jin, a physician from the hospital where Ji-yoon had repeatedly sought treatment. A woman in her mid-40s with a confident manner and professional demeanor. In 3 years, Min Ji-yoon came to our hospital 8 times, she testified. Diagnoses included rib contusion, concussion, fractured wrist, multiple hematomas in various locations. She described each case in detail. The medical records spoke volumes. The nature, location, and severity of the injuries all pointed to systematic physical abuse. What concerned me most, the doctor explained, was that each time the patient explained her injuries as accidental falls or collisions with furniture. These are classic signs of concealed domestic violence. We even referred her to a psychologist, but she refused help. Did you advise the patient to go to the police? Repeatedly. But she always insisted everything was fine, that these were misunderstandings. I saw the fear in her eyes, but you cannot force an adult to seek help. The defense attorney again tried to sow doubt, suggesting the injuries might have resulted from carelessness or even self-harm, but the medical evidence was far too compelling. When it came time for Ji-yoon's own testimony, she rose slowly and walked to the stand. For the first time that day, Jun Ho saw her up close, and his heart clenched painfully. The years had not been kind. Her face was gaunt, deep shadows lay beneath her eyes, strands of premature gray streaked her dark hair. Yet she carried herself with dignity, and in her bearing there was the quiet strength of a woman who had endured trials. Please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, the prosecutor requested. Ji-yoon spoke evenly, almost devoid of emotion, as though she were reciting an official report rather than her own life. They had met 3 years ago at work, both employed in the social sector. A whirlwind courtship, a marriage proposal 6 months later. I needed a father for Tae-hyun, she said, and for the first time emotion entered her voice. The boy was growing up without one, and I hoped Sang-wook would be a good father to him. She described the early months of marriage, when everything seemed perfect. Sang-wook was attentive, kind to Tae-hyun, helpful with chores. But gradually things changed. At first it was just flashes of irritation, Ji-yoon continued. He began drinking after work, became aggressive. Then came the reproaches, accusations that I was a bad wife, that Tae-hyun was unruly. She excused the first instances of physical aggression as stress from work, as fatigue. Then she tried to find ways not to provoke his anger. But the situation only worsened. And then he found out about Tae-hyun, she said, and for the first time real pain colored her voice. About who his real father is. Jun Ho felt the blood drain from his face. A tense silence fell over the courtroom. The defense attorney immediately jumped up. I object. This has nothing to do with the domestic violence case. The objection is overruled, Jun Ho said automatically, though his mind was in turmoil. The witness may continue. Sang-wook accidentally found some old photographs, Ji-yoon continued, keeping her eyes down. University pictures, letters. He matched the dates and realized that Tae-hyun is not the child of my first husband, as I had told him. Her voice trembled slightly. Since then, he's been using this information against me. He threatened to tell everyone who Tae-hyun's real father is if I tried to leave him. He said he would find a way to contact that person and give him a version of the story that would ruin his career and family. An absolute silence fell over the courtroom. Jun Ho realized that everyone was looking at him, waiting for his reaction to such an unexpected turn of events. But he could not move, could barely breathe. Somewhere deep in his mind, an incredible picture slowly took shape. 17 years ago. Breaking up with Ji-yoon. Her refusal to explain the reason for the separation. And now, the boy who looked so much like him. Tae-hyun was his son. After the announced recess, the session continued, but Jun Ho could barely focus on what was happening. Every time he looked at Tae-hyun, memories from 17 years ago flashed in his mind, memories he had believed were buried forever. Seoul National University, final year of law school. Autumn 2007. Ji-yoon was studying sociology in a neighboring department, specializing in family crises. They met in the university library. She was searching for materials for her thesis on family law. He was preparing for a constitutional law exam. Their first date was at a small cafe near campus, serving the best coffee in the area. Her laughter when he awkwardly spilled coffee over his carefully prepared notes. Long walks through the sleeping city of Seoul, talking about the future, sharing plans and dreams. He was going to become a judge, following in his grandfather's footsteps, who had dedicated his life to justice. She wanted to work with troubled families, to help those in difficult situations. They complemented each other, their plans aligned perfectly, and it seemed that a happy future together awaited them. 6 months of love, the brightest in his life. Ji-yoon was not just beautiful, she was smart, kind, understanding. She supported his ambitions, believed in his abilities, dreamed of the day he would become a judge and make the world a better place. Then came the letter. The letter that changed everything. A prestigious internship at the Constitutional Court of Korea. A chance he had dreamed of since his first year. An opportunity to enter the legal elite, gain recommendations from the most influential people in the country. But the internship was in Busan, meaning at least 2 years apart. Choose, Ji-yoon said that last evening. They sat in the same cafe where they had their first date, but the atmosphere was completely different. Your career or our love? I won't wait indefinitely, not knowing if you'll ever return. He remembered every word of that conversation. Her tears when he said he couldn't pass up the opportunity. Her pride when she stood and left without looking back. And his own decision to convince himself that career mattered more than love, that he was still young and would meet someone else. But he had met no one. Even marrying Soo-min, the daughter of an influential politician, he knew it was a marriage of convenience, a union to strengthen his career. Soo-min was beautiful, educated, but there was never the spark he felt with Ji-yoon. Now, looking at their son, because he no longer doubted that Taehyun was his son, Jun-ho realized the price he had paid for his decision. He had lost not only the love of his life but also the chance to be the father to this remarkable boy. The defense attorney called Kim San-wook to the stand. The defendant rose, of medium height, sturdy build, his face showing years of hard physical labor and alcohol abuse. He approached the stand with a defiant air, as if the situation were a misunderstanding soon to be resolved in his favor. Tell the court about your relationship with Min Ji-yoon, his lawyer began. Kim San-wook spoke in a gruff voice, the tone of a man used to commanding and intolerant of objections. I loved that woman, he began. When we met, she was alone, raising a child. I offered her stability, a family. I thought we'd be happy. That woman is mentally unstable, he continued, genuinely convinced. She lives in the past, can't forget some student she had a child with out of wedlock. I tried to be a real father to the boy, but she interfered, constantly comparing me to his real father. That's not true. Taehyun couldn't hold back, jumping to his feet. The courtroom froze. All eyes turned to the teenager standing, fists clenched, glaring at his stepfather with unmistakable hatred. Silence in the court. Jun-ho shouted, though he himself wanted to support the boy. Young man, please sit down. Taehyun sat slowly but continued to glare at his stepfather. The fury in his eyes was so intense that even Kim San-wook paused for a moment. The testimony continued. Kim narrated his distorted version of events, claiming Ji-yoon had hysterical episodes, broke dishes herself, provoked neighbors into false testimonies. Every word was a lie, but he spoke with such conviction that an unprepared listener might have found it believable. And as for the boy, he added with a sneer, glancing at Taehyun, I learned the truth about his father by accident. Found old photos in a box on the top shelf. Some student in a judge's robe, university pictures. I wonder what the public would think knowing that a well-known judge. Enough. A young but firm voice rang out from the courtroom. It was Taehyun. The boy stood again, but this time he held a small folded piece of paper. He looked directly at Jun-ho, his eyes a mixture of despair and hope. I have something to say to the court, he said, his voice trembling but resolute. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Jun-ho felt his heart pound wildly. He saw Ji-yoon trying to stop her son, but the boy resolutely freed himself from her hand. "Young man," Jun-ho began, "this is not the time for witness statements. Please sit down." "Please," Tae-hyun interrupted, stepping forward. "I know the truth. I know who my real father is. And I know he is here in this courtroom." The air in the courtroom seemed to thicken. Journalists froze with notebooks in hand, lawyers exchanged confused glances, and Kim San-wook grinned maliciously, anticipating a scandal. Tae-hyun slowly approached the judge's bench. Each step echoed in the silent courtroom. Ji-yoon finally realized what was happening and tried to stand, but her legs gave way. Reaching the elevated bench where Jun-ho sat, the boy stopped and handed him the folded note. Their eyes met, and Jun-ho saw in them so much pain, hope, and love that his heart felt ready to burst. "This is for you," Tae-hyun whispered. Jun-ho took the note with trembling hands, unfolded it, and read the lines written in neat adolescent handwriting. "Dad, save us. I know who you are. I've known for 2 years. Mom did nothing wrong. She wanted to protect you. But now I don't care about the consequences. Please save us. Your son, Tae-hyun." The courtroom plunged into absolute silence. All eyes were on the judge, waiting for his reaction. Ji-yoon covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. Kim San-wook finally realized his plan had backfired, and his face contorted with anger. Jun-ho slowly rose, holding the note in his hands. He felt dozens of eyes on him but saw only the boy before him, his son, whom he had not known for 16 years. "The court will recess for 1 hour, Jun-ho announced, his voice barely concealing his agitation. "I ask everyone to leave except the victim's family." The courtroom slowly emptied under the hum of disgruntled journalists and curious onlookers. Lawyers tried to object, demanding the session continue, but the judge's tone allowed no dissent. Only 3 remained, Jun-ho, Ji-yoon, and Tae-hyun. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows and distant city noises. Jun-ho removed his robe and slowly descended from the bench. For the first time in many years, he felt not like a judge, but simply as a man confronting the most important truth of his life. He approached the bench where Ji-yoon and Tae-hyun sat, the woman he once loved more than life itself, and the boy who turned out to be his son. Ji-yoon did not lift her eyes, her face was wet with tears. "Ji-yoon," he said quietly, sitting opposite her, "this child. Don't you dare." She snapped, raising her head. Her eyes burned with a mixture of pain, anger, and despair. 17 years ago you chose a prestigious university over our love. I raised him alone, worked 2 jobs to give him an education. And when I married, I thought my son would finally have a father. But all I got was pain and humiliation." Her voice trembled with barely contained emotion. "Do you think it was easy to remain silent? To see your photos in the newspapers, read about your achievements, know that you were married, that you had a daughter? And all this time, the boy who looked so much like you grew up beside me, and sometimes I felt like you had come back from the past." "Mom," Tae-hyun said softly, he didn't know. Ji-yoon turned sharply to her son. How long have you known?" "I found the photos 2 years ago," the boy explained, his voice sounding far older than his age. "In an old box on the top shelf, while looking for New Year decorations. There were your university pictures, letters he wrote to you." Tae-hyun took a crumpled photograph from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. The photo showed young Jun-ho and Ji-yoon embracing by the university fountain. Both laughed, looking at the camera, happiness shining in their eyes. "I matched the dates," the boy continued. 9 months from your last letter to him to my birth. Then I found information about Judge Lee Jun Ho online, looked at his photos. And I understood." Jun-ho took the photograph with trembling hands. He remembered that day. It had been at the graduation party, a week before everything fell apart. "Why didn't you tell me?" He asked Ji-yoon, for the first time in many years letting real emotion into his voice. Why didn't you say you were pregnant? And what would have changed? She replied bitterly. You had already made your choice. Your career was more important than our relationship. I didn't want to be a burden to your brilliant career. I didn't want you to marry me out of obligation. But I had the right to know. Jun-ho's voice cracked with years of pain. He had the right to know his father. I had the right to be part of his upbringing. And I had the right to pride. Ji-yoon flared. I wasn't going to humiliate myself, begging you to come back for the child. I didn't want you to see us as an obstacle to your plans. Tae-hyun looked from his mother to his father, and the anguish in his young eyes was so intense that it tore at the heart. Finally, he couldn't hold back. I've had enough. He shouted, his voice carrying a grown-up determination. Stop fighting over something that happened 17 years ago. I don't care who was right or wrong. What matters is what's happening now. He stood and walked to the window, overlooking the rainy city. That monster, he nodded toward the door behind which Kim San-wook waited for the session to resume, has been tormenting Mom for 3 years. He beats her, humiliates her, threatens her. And all this time, he's been blackmailing us, threatening to contact you and tell a version of the story that would ruin your career. Tae-hyun turned to his father. Do you know what he said? That he would find a way to reach you and portray Mom as a selfish woman who hid a child and then tried to use your position. That you'd lose your job, your reputation, your family. Jun-ho felt a surge of rage, not judicial, impartial rage, but paternal, protective fury. He blackmailed you using my name? Ji-yoon nodded, not lifting her eyes. At first, he was kind to us. Tae-hyun needed a father, and I was so lonely after all those years. It seemed like we could finally have a normal family. Her voice trembled, but then he started drinking. Lost jobs, got angry, looked for someone to blame. And when he accidentally found those photos, he used them against us, Tae-hyun finished. He told Mom that if she filed for divorce, he would find a way to contact you and present everything in a way that suited him. That you'd lose everything, your job, your reputation, your family. Family? Jun-ho repeated. We know you're married, Ji-yoon said quietly. You have a daughter. 10 years old. Choi Min-jun. We didn't want to destroy your life, intrude as ghosts from the past. Jun-ho felt as if the entire world had collapsed on him. Yes, he had a wife and a daughter. But his marriage to Soo-min had long since become a formality. They lived as neighbors, maintaining appearances for society and for their daughter. There was no love, only mutual respect and shared interests. You were following me? I just wanted to know who my father was, Tae-hyun said, and for the first time, traces of childhood appeared in his voice. There's a lot of information about judges online. Your biography, family, career. I read about your cases, felt proud that my father defends justice. The boy stepped closer. I dreamed of approaching you, telling you who I am. I dreamed of having a dad, like other kids. But Mom forbade it. And then that bastard came along and made our lives hell. Jun-ho stood and went to the window. The rain intensified, streaming down the glass and distorting the city view. He thought of the years he'd lived, the choices he'd made, the price of success. What do you want from me? He asked without turning around. Justice, Tae-hyun answered firmly. You're a judge. You've devoted your life to protecting the weak from the strong. You can protect us. I cannot preside over a case in which I have a personal interest. It goes against all principles of justice. Then find a way, the boy said, his voice carrying adult resolve. Years ago, you chose your career over your family. Now use that career to save your family. Jun-ho turned to his son and saw in his eyes a reflection of his own youth, the same determination, the same desire for justice that had once led him into the law. All right, he said softly. I will find a way. But I will need to tell the truth. The whole truth. That evening, Jun Ho sat in his office at the courthouse, staring at a photo of his daughter on his desk. Min Jun smiled from the portrait, a carefree 10-year-old girl with pigtails, believing her dad was the best and fairest person in the world. And somewhere in the city lived his son, whom he had not known for 16 years. A son who bravely protected his mother from a domestic tyrant, and who today had called him dad. A son who had known the truth for 2 years but had remained silent to protect his father's life. Outside, the city sank into twilight. The rain had stopped, but clouds still blanketed the sky. Jun Ho thought about how completely his life had changed in a single day. That morning, he had been a successful judge with an impeccable reputation. Now he faced a choice between career and family, the same choice he had made 17 years ago. There was a knock at the door. Su Min entered. She was an elegant 38-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed and groomed. The daughter of a powerful politician, she had been raised in the public eye and knew how to maintain her composure in any situation. Jun Ho, we need to talk, she said, sitting in the chair across from his desk. Her voice was devoid of emotion, only businesslike focus. I'm listening. A reporter from Chosun Ilbo called. Park Sung-ho, you know him. He says he has interesting information about the family of a well-known judge. Wants to meet tomorrow morning. Jun Ho closed his eyes. Here it begins. When a scandal breaks, journalists move faster than the police. And what did you tell him? That I don't know what he's talking about. Su Min paused, studying her husband's face. Jun Ho, if you have any problems, it's better to tell me now. We can strategize. He was silent for a long time, then opened the desk drawer and took out the note Tae-hyun had given him. Read this. Su Min took the paper and read it. Her face remained impassive. Years in a political family had taught her to control emotions. Understood, she finally said. How old is he? 16. So it was before our marriage, she said, placing the note back on the desk. What are you going to do? Jun Ho looked at his wife. Over 12 years of marriage, he had often been surprised by her practicality and ability to find solutions in the most difficult situations. I don't know. If I acknowledge him, it will destroy my career. The reporter will dig anyway, Su Min said matter-of-factly. If the story leaks in a distorted form, we all suffer. Me, Min Jun, you, your career. But. She leaned forward, there's another way. You can take the initiative. Tell everything yourself, honestly. Show that you have nothing to hide. The public might even sympathize, a judge who didn't know about his son for 17 years but embraced him upon learning the truth. Jun Ho looked at his wife in surprise. You mean I should acknowledge him publicly? I mean you should act according to your conscience, Su Min said, and for the first time in many years, warmth touched her voice. Our marriage has long been a formality, we both know that. Min Jun is old enough to understand. And I've always regretted that she has no siblings. Jun Ho stared at his wife, astonished. He had never expected such a reaction from her. Su Min. Tomorrow morning, you'll hold a press conference, she continued with businesslike determination. Tell the whole truth. About your son, about not knowing of his existence, about the domestic violence case you were inadvertently involved in. Show that you are an honest man willing to take responsibility for your actions. Jun Ho stood and went to the window. The lights of the night city twinkled outside, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in a judge's office. Why are you doing this? He asked. Why are you helping me? Su Min stood and approached him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture in their relationship. Because, for the first time in many years, I see real emotion in your eyes, she said softly. For 12 years we lived like good neighbors, respecting each other, but not loving. I don't want to live that way anymore. But I want Min Jun to grow up in an atmosphere of honesty and sincerity. She paused, looking at the city lights. Besides, this boy, your son, he deserves a father. And you deserve the chance to fix a 17-year-old mistake. And what about us? Our marriage? Su Min smiled sadly. We'll remain friends and good parents for Min Jun. But let's finally stop pretending there's something between us that isn't there. She headed for the door but paused at the threshold. Go to your son, Jun Ho. He's been waiting for you for 16 years. Alone, Jun Ho sat in the dark for a long time, contemplating the decision ahead. The note from Tae-hyun lay on the desk, and every time he read it, his heart ached with pain and filled with warmth at the same time. Dad, save us. 2 simple words that changed everything. The next morning at 9, the courthouse conference room filled with journalists from all major media outlets. News that the well-known Judge Lee Jun Ho was about to make an important announcement spread through the city like wildfire. Jun Ho stood behind the podium, facing a sea of cameras, microphones, and reporters. In the front row sat Ji-yoon and Tae-hyun. He had asked them to come. He wanted them to hear his words firsthand, to understand that he would no longer hide from the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, and absolute silence fell. Yesterday, during the hearing of a domestic violence case, I learned that one of the victims is my son, whose existence I did not know for 16 years. A murmur spread through the room. Photographers clicked shutters, reporters scribbled rapidly in their notebooks. But Jun Ho continued, ignoring the commotion. 17 years ago, as a senior law student, I was in a relationship with a woman named Min Ji-yoon. Our relationship ended when I chose to continue my studies in another city. I chose my career over love. I did not know she was pregnant. I did not know I had a son. Jun Ho paused, looking at Tae-hyun. The boy sat upright, pride and excitement shining in his eyes. Yesterday, my son handed me a note during the hearing. He wrote, "Dad, save us." This 16-year-old boy discovered the truth about his father 2 years ago, but his mother forbade him from contacting me. She forbade it because she did not want to destroy my family or my career. The room fell into absolute silence. Everyone understood that they were witnessing an event that would go down in the history of Korean justice. 3 years ago, Min Ji-yoon married a man she hoped would be a good father to her son. But he turned out to be a domestic tyrant. When he learned the truth about the boy's origin, he used it to blackmail her. He threatened to ruin my reputation if she tried to leave him. Jun Ho saw Ji-yoon brush away a tear. Tae-hyun held her hand tightly, pride in his father shining in his eyes. Today, I have made a decision. I am stepping down from presiding over this case due to a personal interest, but I will remain as a witness. I will fight for justice for my family by all lawful means. A forest of hands went up. Journalists shouted questions, but Jun Ho raised his hand, asking for silence. I have one more statement. My wife, Su Min, and my daughter, Min Jun, are aware of the situation and support my decision. We plan a peaceful divorce. I officially acknowledge Min Tae-hyun as my son and will take part in raising him. The room erupted with questions. Reporters shouted over each other, photographers jostled for the best shot. But Jun Ho no longer listened. He was looking at his son, and in that gaze was all the love he had been unable to express for 16 years. After the press conference, Jun Ho approached Ji-yoon and Tae-hyun. Do you think I did okay? He asked his son. Tae-hyun stood and hugged his father, for the first time in his life. The embrace was awkward and uncertain but sincere. Yes, Dad. You did fine, the boy whispered. Ji-yoon watched them, tears rolling down her cheeks again. But now they were tears of relief, not of pain. The case was handed over to Judge Kim Hye-ran, a 50-year-old woman known for her strict principles in family law and her zero tolerance for domestic violence. In her 20 years on the bench, she had never issued a lenient sentence in such cases. Jun Ho now sat on the witness bench beside his son and Ji-yoon. It was a strange feeling, being on the opposite side of the courtroom to which he had devoted his entire career. The story gained massive media attention. The whole country followed every development. Public opinion was divided. Some admired the judge's honesty, willing to sacrifice his career for his family. Others criticized him for unprofessional conduct and undermining the judiciary. But the overwhelming majority supported his decision to protect his family. Kim San-wook's lawyer tried to spin the situation in his favor, claiming the case was fabricated for publicity and that the former judge had colluded with his ex-girlfriend to gain fame. But the witness testimony was too compelling, and the medical evidence irrefutable. Tae-hyun approached the podium. Judge Kim allowed him to testify despite his young age. The boy wore his school uniform, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes reflected adult determination. "Tell the court about your relationship with your stepfather," Prosecutor Lim So-yeon asked. Tae-hyun spoke clearly and calmly, but his words carried deep pain. For the first 6 months, he was a good person. He played soccer with me, helped with math homework, took me to the movies. I was happy that Mom had a husband and that I had a father. He paused to gather his thoughts, but then he started drinking. At first only on weekends, then every day after work. His personality changed completely. He began shouting at Mom, blaming her for being a bad wife. When did the physical abuse begin? A year after the wedding. At first, it was just shoves, then slaps. Mom asked me not to tell anyone, saying he was just tired from work. Tae-hyun looked at Jun Ho, and when he found Mom's photos with my real father, he became a completely different person. How exactly did he use that information? He told Mom that if she tried to leave him, he would find Judge Lee and tell him a version of the story that would ruin his career. That he would portray Mom as a selfish woman who hid a child and then tried to use Dad's position. The courtroom fell silent. Kim San-wook glared at his stepson, but no longer with his previous confidence. "And what did he say to you personally?" Tae-hyun hesitated for a moment, then straightened and looked directly at the judge. "That I'm a bastard nobody needs. That my real father left Mom because he didn't want to deal with someone like me. That if I tell anyone the truth about what's happening at home, he'll make sure Mom goes to jail for defamation." Jun Ho clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. Ji-yoon quietly sobbed beside him. "Did you believe him?" "At first, yes," Tae-hyun's voice trembled. "I was small, stupid. I thought that if my real father found out about me, he would hate Mom for hiding the truth. So I stayed silent and endured." "What changed?" Tae-hyun looked at his mother, then at his father. "A week ago, he hit Mom so hard she lost consciousness. I called an ambulance, and the doctor said that a little more, and she would have had a severe brain injury. When Mom woke up, he told her that next time he would kill her. And he added that he would start hitting me if she didn't obey him." Not even a breath was heard in the courtroom. "And that's when you decided to act?" "That's when I realized it didn't matter what happened to me or my father's reputation. What mattered was saving Mom. That's why I wrote that note." When Tae-hyun finished his testimony, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom. Even experienced journalists wiped away tears. Next, Jun Ho approached the podium. It felt strange to give testimony in a courtroom where he had administered justice for so many years. "Tell the court how you felt when you learned the truth," Judge Kim asked. "Shock," Jun Ho answered honestly. "First shock, then shame. Shame for not being there when I was needed. Shame for letting a tyrant torment my family, using my own reputation as a weapon against them." "Do you blame Min Ji-yoon for hiding the truth about your son?" Jun Ho looked at Ji-yoon. "No. I understand why she did it. 17 years ago, I chose my career over love. She had every right to think I would choose reputation over responsibility. And now you are ready to take that responsibility?" "More than ready. I want to be a father to my son. I want to protect both of them from any threats. And I am ready to spend the rest of my life atoning for my mistakes." When it was the defendant's turn for a final word, Kim San-wook tried one last attack. This so-called judge destroyed my family, he shouted, losing all self-control. He conspired with his wife to sue me and take the boy. They plotted against me. It's all a spectacle for money and fame. But his words convinced no one. The evidence was too clear, the witness testimony too sincere. A week later, Judge Kim Hai-ran announced the verdict. The courtroom was packed. Everyone wanted to hear the conclusion of this story that had shaken the nation. The defendant, Kim San-wook, is found guilty of systematic physical and psychological abuse of his wife, Min Ji-yoon, and of threats against the minor, Min Tae-hyun, the judge said firmly. Given the particular cruelty of the crimes, the use of blackmail and threats toward a child, the defendant is sentenced to 5 years in a high-security correctional facility. The courtroom murmured approval. The sentence was harsher than even the prosecutors had expected. Furthermore, the court issues a permanent restraining order prohibiting the defendant from any contact with the victims. Violation of this order will result in additional criminal liability. Kim San-wook listened with a stone face. When the guards approached to take him away, he turned to his former family. "You think 5 years is a lot?" he hissed. "I'll get out and find you. All 3 of you." Tae-hyun stood. Over the year of legal proceedings, he had noticeably matured, grown taller, and gained confidence. "By then, I'll be 21, he said calmly. "And I'll be ready to face you." The young man's eyes held such determination that even Kim San-wook fell silent. The guards led him away to the approving murmur of the courtroom. After the verdict was announced, Jun Ho, Ji-yoon, and Tae-hyun left the courthouse amid camera flashes and journalists' calls. They did not answer questions and silently walked to the car. Only when they were alone did Ji-yoon speak. "What happens to us now?" Jun Ho looked at her, then at his son. Over the year, their relationship had gradually improved. At first, awkward cafe meetings, then walks together, family dinners. Tae-hyun gradually adjusted to having a father, and Jun Ho learned to be a parent to his nearly grown son. "I don't know exactly," he answered honestly. "But I know I want to be part of your lives. If you'll allow me." "And your daughter?" "Min Jun?" "Soo Min and I divorced 6 months ago," Jun Ho said. "A peaceful divorce, as planned. Min Jun lives with her mother, but I see her every weekend. Soo Min wants her to meet Tae-hyun. She thinks it will be good for the girl to have an older brother." Tae-hyun looked at his father in surprise. "She doesn't mind?" "On the contrary. Soo Min is very wise. She understands that a real family is built on honesty, not lies." The boy hugged his father. "I've dreamed of this for so long. A real family." Ji-yoon watched them, and the long-standing resentment in her eyes slowly melted. The pain remained, but hope appeared. "Jun Ho," she said quietly, "I need time. To forgive. To learn to trust again." "We have time," he replied. "Our whole lives ahead of us." A year later, Jun Ho stood in front of a building bearing the sign, Min Tae-hyun Center for Victims of Domestic Violence. After the high-profile trial and stepping down from the bench, he had pondered his next steps. Offers poured in, major law firms eagerly sought him, seeing his story as excellent PR. But Jun Ho realized he wanted to do something more meaningful. The idea to create a center to help families affected by domestic violence came during a conversation with his son. Tae-hyun spoke about the terror of staying silent, having no one to turn to. "If there had been a place where kids could anonymously share their problems," he said, "maybe we could have gotten help sooner." Jun Ho used his savings and compensation for early retirement from the judiciary to open the center. Naming it after his son was a spontaneous decision. "If it helps other children," Tae-hyun said when his father suggested the idea, "then let it be so." Ji-yoon became the center's director. Her background as a sociologist and personal experience with domestic violence made her perfect for working with victims. Over a year, they helped more than 77 families find a way out of seemingly hopeless situations. Tae-hyun, who had just turned 18, enrolled in the law university, the very same one his father had once graduated from. He wanted to become a lawyer specializing in family law, to protect the rights of children and women. Law should protect the weak from the strong, he said. That's what you taught me. Every weekend, Tae-hyun spent time with his father and younger sister Min-young. The 11-year-old adored her older brother, who patiently helped her with homework and told her fascinating stories. "Dad," she said once during a family dinner, "why doesn't Tae-hyun live with us all the time?" Jun Ho and Soo Min exchanged glances. Despite their divorce, they had maintained a friendly relationship for the sake of their daughter. "Because he has a mom who loves him very much," Soo Min explained. "But he is your brother, and that will never change." The relationship between Jun Ho and Ji-yoon developed slowly and cautiously. They had started dating 6 months ago, first just for work, then they began having dinner together after long days at the center. Gradually, the ice of distrust and resentment began to melt. Ji-yoon was learning to trust a man again, and Jun Ho realized that the love he had felt for her 17 years ago had never disappeared. On the contrary, it had grown deeper, more mature. Yesterday, he had proposed to her. Now, Jun Ho stood in his office at the center, sorting through documents from new cases. Over the course of a year, hundreds of people had come to them, women with children, elderly people abused by adult children, teenagers suffering from cruel parents. There was a knock at the door. Tae-hyun entered carrying a bag from the nearby cafe. "I brought lunch," the young man said, placing the bag on the table. "Mom said you forgot to eat again." Over the past year and a half, Tae-hyun had changed significantly. The wariness in his eyes was gone, replaced by confidence in his movements. He no longer looked like a child forced to protect his mother. Now he was a young man who knew he was loved and who had learned to love in return. "Thank you, son," Jun Ho said. Those words still sounded wonderful to him. Son. He said it every day and was amazed each time by how much it contained. "By the way," Tae-hyun pulled an envelope from his pocket, "this is for you. It arrived this morning." Jun Ho took the letter and was surprised to see the return address, Correctional Colony No. 15, where Kim San-wook, his former stepfather, was serving his sentence. "What's this?" Tae-hyun asked, noticing the change in his father's expression. "A letter from your former stepfather." The young man frowned. What could he possibly write? Jun Ho opened the envelope and read a short note. It contained only a few lines, written in a clumsy hand. "I have realized my mistakes. I apologize to Ji-yoon and the boy. I will never disturb you again. Wishing you happiness. Kim San-wook." "He is apologizing," Jun Ho said, showing the letter to his son. Tae-hyun read it and shrugged. It's too late for apologies. But it's good that he finally understood. "Are you going to forgive him?" The young man thought for a moment. "You know, I feel neither anger nor pity toward him. Just nothing. He's no longer part of our life. We have a family, work we care about, people we help. Why waste energy on the past?" Jun Ho looked at his son with pride. There was wisdom in his words, the kind that comes only through pain and healing. "You're right," he said, tearing up the letter and throwing it in the trash. "It's better to focus on the future." A year and a half later, Jun Ho and Ji-yoon were married. The wedding was modest, only close friends and colleagues from the center. Tae-hyun walked his mother down the aisle, and Min-young was the bride's junior bridesmaid. After the ceremony, they gathered at a restaurant. The entire evening was filled with laughter, warm speeches, and a feeling that finally, everything had fallen into place. Jun Ho stood to give a toast. "They say life gives a second chance only to those who know how to value the first. 18 years ago, I missed my first chance to be happy. But it turned out that life is more merciful than I deserved." He looked at Tae-hyun. "My son taught me that true courage is not in winning cases in court, but in the ability to fight for those you love." That true strength is not in power, but in being willing to admit your mistakes and make them right. Then he turned to Ji-yoon, and my wife showed me that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest of human abilities. That love does not disappear with time and pain, but only grows stronger when it has a true foundation. Ji-yoon stood and hugged her husband. We lost 18 years, she said. But we didn't lose the most important thing, the ability to love and be a family. Tae-hyun raised his glass. To our family. To finally finding each other. To family. Everyone echoed. Soo-min, who was at the wedding with Min-young, also raised her glass, to the fact that sometimes what is broken can be mended so that it becomes even stronger. 2 years later, the Center for Helping Victims of Domestic Violence became one of the most successful in the country. Jun Ho and Ji-yoon had turned personal tragedy into a source of help for hundreds of other families. They opened branches in 3 cities, and the hotline operated around the clock. Tae-hyun enrolled in law school with the highest scores in his class. During his entrance interview, he was asked why he had chosen law. My father taught me that law is not just letters on paper, he answered. It's a tool to protect the weak from the strong. I want to continue his work, but now as a lawyer. Min-young grew up in an atmosphere of love and understanding. She had 2 homes, one with her mother Soo-min, the other with her father, stepmother Ji-yoon, and older brother Tae-hyun. She didn't find this unusual. For her, it was simply one big family where everyone cared for each other. On his 45th birthday, Jun Ho sat in the garden behind the house they had bought together as a family. Tae-hyun was preparing for university exams, Ji-yoon was working on documents from a new case at the center, and Min-young was doing her homework. An ordinary family evening. But for a man who 18 years ago had chosen a career-driven solitude, it was nothing short of a miracle. Ji-yoon sat next to him on the garden bench. What are you thinking about? How strangely life works, he replied, holding his wife. Sometimes it feels like everything is going wrong. And then you realize that it was the right path all along. Do you regret anything? Jun Ho thought. The lost years, yes. But not the choice that led me to you and Tae-hyun. Without those mistakes, I wouldn't have become the person who could appreciate what I have now. Tae-hyun came out of the house and approached his parents, holding an envelope. Mom, Dad, I have news. What is it? Ji-yoon and Jun Ho asked at the same time. I've been accepted into the Legal Aid Center's internship program at the university. I'll be working with families affected by domestic violence while still studying. Jun Ho looked at his son with pride. So, the work will continue? The work will continue, Tae-hyun nodded. But now with our hands. As a family. At that moment, Jun Ho realized the circle had closed. 18 years ago, he had lost love chasing success. Today, he had both love and success, but most importantly, he had a family that understood that true success is measured not by positions or money, but by the ability to make the world a little better. 3 more years passed. The Min Tae-hyun Center for Victims of Domestic Violence became not just a regional organization but a nationwide network. Ji-yoon headed the Coordination Council, uniting all branches, while Jun Ho handled the legal aspects of the work and trained the staff. Tae-hyun, now 21, balanced his final year of law school with work at the center. His thesis focused on improving legislation for protecting minors and families experiencing domestic violence. Min-young, now 14, often spent time at the center, helping with organizational tasks and interacting with children who had suffered from family abuse. Despite her young age, she showed remarkable maturity and empathy. You know, Dad, she said one day, returning home from a day at the center, I want to become a psychologist. I want to help children who went through what Tae-hyun did. Jun Ho was proud of his children. Both had grown to understand the value of family, both wanted to dedicate their lives to helping others. But life had another challenge in store for them. One autumn day, while Tae-hyun was working at the center with new cases, a young woman of about 25 approached him. She was pale, her face showing traces of bruises that she tried to hide under makeup. "Excuse me," she said softly, "I heard you help people in my situation." Of course, Tae-hyun led her to a private office. "Tell me what happened." The woman introduced herself as Park Song-hee. She recounted a story painfully reminiscent of Tae-hyun's own childhood, a tyrannical husband who was gentle and caring at first, then started drinking and becoming aggressive. "But the scariest part," she said, her voice trembling, "is that he threatens my son. Little Min-woo is only 5, and my husband says that if I try to leave, he'll kill the child." Tae-hyun felt the familiar pain in his chest. In the woman's eyes, he saw the same fear that once appeared in his mother's. "We will help you," he said firmly. "Both you and your son. But I need you to tell me everything in detail." Park Song-hee spoke, and Tae-hyun took notes. Systematic beatings, threats, psychological pressure, a standard picture of a domestic tyrant. But when she named her husband, Tae-hyun froze. "Excuse me, repeat your husband's name." "Kim Dong-sik," she said. "Why?" Tae-hyun felt blood drain from his face. Kim Dong-sik, the younger brother of Kim San-wook, his former stepfather. The very man who had once said that family problems should be resolved within the family, without outside interference. "I need to consult with my colleagues," Tae-hyun said. "Please wait here." He left the office and immediately went to his father. Jun Ho was in the neighboring building, in the center's legal department. "Dad, we have a problem," Tae-hyun said, entering his father's office. Jun Ho looked up from his documents. "What happened?" Tae-hyun told him about the new case. When he mentioned the name Kim Dong-sik, Jun Ho's face darkened. "His brother," he said quietly. "The brother of the man who tormented your mother." "Exactly. And the question is how we should act. Formally, we have no grounds to refuse help. But it could be a trap," Jun Ho finished. "A way to take revenge on our family." They discussed the situation at length. On one hand, the center's principles didn't allow them to refuse help to anyone in need. On the other hand, any connection with the Kim family could be dangerous. "What if it's true?" Tae-hyun asked. "What if this woman and her child really are in danger, and we refuse to help because of old grudges?" Jun Ho looked at his son. Over the years, Tae-hyun had grown into a mature young man, capable of making difficult decisions. "You're right," he finally said. "We can't let the past influence our decision to help those who need it." They returned to Park Song-hee and had a detailed conversation with her. Her story was sincere, and the fear in her eyes was real. Tae-hyun decided to help her. Over the following weeks, the center's staff worked with the Park family, helping the woman gather evidence of abuse, find a safe place to live with her child, and prepare documents for divorce. Kim Dong-sik, learning about the center's involvement, flew into a rage. He tried several times to break into the building, threatened staff, and demanded his wife and son be returned. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he shouted during one of these visits. "My brother already took care of your family. Now it's my turn." Jun Ho called the police but knew the threats might not be empty. Kim San-wook was due to be released from prison in a year, and it was unclear what plans for revenge he might have had. But the family decided not to back down. They strengthened security at the center, Tae-hyun avoided walking alone, and Ji-yoon always reported her whereabouts. A month later, Park Song-hee received her divorce and a restraining order against her husband. Kim Dong-sik was arrested for violating the court order and making threats. The woman and her son moved to another city to start a new life. "Thank you," she said to Tae-hyun on the day of their departure. "If it weren't for you, I would never have found the strength to leave." "Everyone deserves to live without fear," he replied. "Especially children." But the story did not end there. Early one morning in March, 6 months before his planned release, Kim San-wook died in the prison hospital of a heart attack. The news reached the Lee family through an official notice from the correctional facility. Jun Ho read the document while having breakfast with his family. Ji-yoon was making pancakes for the children, Tae-hyun was reviewing notes before an exam, and Min-young was packing her school bag. "What is it?" Ji-yoon asked, noticing her husband's serious expression. "Kim San-wook has died," Jun Ho said quietly. Everyone froze. Tae-hyun looked up from his books. "How?" "A heart attack. Last night in the prison hospital." Silence fell. Each of them processed the news in their own way. Ji-yoon felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This man had caused her a great deal of pain, yet she did not wish him dead. "I feel sorry for him," Tae-hyun said unexpectedly. "He lived a life full of anger and pain. He was probably unhappy himself." Jun Ho looked at his son with pride. The capacity for forgiveness and compassion, qualities that cannot be taught artificially, either exist in a person or they don't. "And what will happen with his brother now?" Ji-yoon asked. Dong-sik received a 2-year suspended sentence for threats and violating the restraining order, Jun Ho replied. "But we'll handle him if necessary." Life went on. Kim San-wook's death became a kind of full stop in their past. There was no longer anyone who could remind them of dark times simply by existing. Tae-hyun graduated from university with honors and entered graduate school while continuing to work at the center. His dissertation focused on legal mechanisms to protect children from domestic violence. Min-young was admitted to a prestigious high school with a focus on psychology and social sciences. She still spent a lot of time at the center, and many staff members remarked on her natural talent for working with people. Jun Ho and Ji-yoon received a national award for their contribution to the development of the family protection system. Their center became a model for similar organizations, not only in Korea but in other countries as well. One summer day, a young journalist visited the center to prepare a report on domestic violence. "Tell me, how did you manage to turn personal tragedy into help for thousands of people?" she asked. Ji-yoon and Jun Ho exchanged a glance. They rarely gave interviews about the personal side of their story. "You know," Ji-yoon said, "when you go through hell, you have 2 choices. You can stay in that hell forever, feeding on anger and resentment. Or you can use your experience to help others avoid similar situations." "Our family chose the second path," Jun Ho added. "And we regret nothing." The journalist recorded every word. "And what would you say to people currently in a similar situation?" Tae-hyun, present during the conversation, replied, "There is always a way out. Even when it seems like the whole world is against you, there are people willing to help. The important thing is not to be afraid to ask for help. And remember," Min-young added, "that children are not to blame for the problems of adults. Every child deserves to live in safety and love." 10 years later, the Min Tae-hyun Center for Victims of Domestic Violence became the largest organization of its kind in Asia. Tae-hyun, having defended his doctoral dissertation and become a renowned lawyer, headed the center's legal department. Min-young graduated in family psychology and worked with children who had suffered from abuse. Jun Ho, now 57, wrote a book about his experiences, both personal and professional. The book Second Chance became a bestseller and was translated into many languages. Ji-yoon gained international recognition as an expert on domestic violence. Her methods for working with victims were adopted by centers around the world. Their family became a symbol that even from the most tragic circumstances, something good can emerge if one has the courage to face the truth and a willingness to help others. One spring day, a young woman with bruises on her face and a 3-year-old son came to the center. She was afraid to speak, afraid to complain, afraid to hope. Ji-yoon took her hand and said, "Don't be afraid. We know what you're going through. And we will help you find a way out." Tae-hyun knelt beside the boy and quietly said, "You know, little one, your mother is very brave. And soon, everything will be okay. I promise." For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in the child's eyes. And life went on, giving second chances to those who knew how to value them. Jun Ho stood by the window of his office, watching his son work with new clients. Tae-hyun had grown into a wonderful man, kind, strong, just. Min-young had also chosen the path of helping others. 17 years ago, he thought he had lost everything by choosing a career over love. But life had been preparing a different path for him, longer, more difficult, yet ultimately leading to true happiness. The rain outside reminded him of the day it all began. But now the rain did not seem sad. Now he knew that after every storm, the sun always comes out. And deep in his heart, he was grateful to fate for giving him the chance to make amends for past mistakes and build a family based on love, honesty, and mutual respect. A family that helped other families find happiness. A family that proved even a broken heart can heal if there is enough love.